Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this series, we're going to be looking at the top 10 Mystic champions in the game. This is something that I have sort of let go doing, and now I am back into doing it in this December 2024. We're going to take a snapshot of the game and take a look at all the powerful Mystics in the game through my lens as a player. Now, a couple shout outs, a little bit of housekeeping. I want to give a big shout out to community member Misty K. She is an incredible artist and graphic designer, and she is creating graphics for Vega, for myself and most of the Illuminati that are interested in making their top 10 lists. If you look at the graphic here, you can see that this is tailored to the way I'm currently playing the game. I have experience in Masters War. I have pushed BGs a little bit in the past, but currently I'm in a chill alliance, and my main focus in the game now is PvE content, having a variety of champs in my roster, which is not the largest roster in the game, making sure I have all my pieces of utility covered, because let's be honest, the best rewards in the game currently are in the content, in the end game content, and having a roster that is ready to tackle that when it drops is really important, and that's how I'm currently playing the game. So you will notice that I have rated fun and content as my main goals with just a little bit of BGs, because I do push the gladiator circuit every time, so having a few defenders is of course really important there. But another big shout out of course goes to Vega, the mastermind behind the greatest tier list in all MCOC currently, and the head of the Illuminati. If you've checked out that tier list, just know that lots of brains go into making it and giving input, including myself. So, that is sort of like the gospel for rankings, and, it's got that great spreadsheet that makes it more customizable. But in today's video, we're going to just go through my perspective, which as a player, I'm a little bit different than Vega. I've got my own opinions, and we're going to go through my personal rankings for the top 10 Mystics. And then at the end, I'm also going to show a graphic that has a little bit more of an objective top 10 for sort of the more average player, just looking for like power and like who is the best champion in the class. So we'll spend a lot of time going over personal, the way I play, my own personal play style, as well as what I'm currently conquering in the game. And then at the end, we'll show the graphic with the more objective recommended list, and I'll kind of go over some of the differences without going into as much detail. So with that, we're going to get into my own personal top 10 for the Mystic class, starting with some honorable mentions. So the first honorable mention is actually Enchantress, and this is a very personal one for me. I have tried to push Enchantress to the limit. I've tried to learn her, memorize that spell book, and I just really enjoy playing her. I think that there's going to maybe be a buff for her because she's a little impractical currently, but when you look at the array of utilities she has, she can approach buffs with Atrophy, Neutralize, or Nullify, which is pretty cool. She has a little bit of Power Steal as well as Power Gain, which you always like to see in a Mystic. And then she has lots of defensive things, like she can go unstoppable, she can miss, and she can also not get knocked down. And then her damage sources are anywhere from Cold Snap to Incinerate to Poison with a Synergy or Shock. So it's like she really can do anything. There aren't many things that slow her down. The problem is you just have to throw a million special ones and remember everything before she gets into God mode. So she's not very practical, but I have a soft spot for her. And if she gets a little buff to be a little bit more practical, she's going to be crazy. Not to mention she's an annoying defender. So for me personally, she makes the honorable mention list. I think for many people, especially as an attacker, they won't agree with me, but I do have a couple videos, so you might be surprised at what she can do. Go check her out. Another honorable mention for me is White Tiger. Now, I think like 4 months ago, White Tiger would have been higher on this list, but it's just the Mystics that have been coming out lately, especially with like the Serpent countering abilities, I think have just knocked her into the honorable mention tier. Now, she is quite simple to use. She has a really cool Power Steal mechanic. If you know what you're doing, if you're watching the power bars and you're like alternating the specials in the way that you're supposed to with the fury buffs and her other ways to increase her damage, she's going to do some amazing things. Like, she used to be one of the best Serpent counters, and then like 2 more came out that are better than her. I think she's very simple, but it still takes a little bit of skill to use her the best way. Wish I could put her on the top 10, but she's just going to be an honorable mention for me. And then finally, Diablo. I think on my objective list, Diablo is considerably higher. I would highly recommend him for most players. He's that good. for me personally, I'm not a big fan of like parry heavy, and I know that's not all he does. Like, he's got other utility, but like for the most part, that's sort of like just, hey, let's build a lot of poisons with a little bit of like, you know, nullify from afar and energy resistance and stuff. Like, he's got utility. It's just he's not my cup of tea. And I know he is at his best when he's awakened, when you're running the recoil masteries, which I barely ever do. So for me personally, I can't not talk about him because he's very powerful. If you have that 7-star, especially a duped one, you are in really good shape. I highly recommend ranking him, but for the way I'm playing the game currently, I don't really see a need for him, so he's just an honorable mention. So now let's get into the actual top 10 list. My personal number 10 is going to be Tigra. Now, Tigra is still extremely powerful, and I have a video on the FinTech challenge and the the EOP quest. I really enjoyed using her, and that's why she still makes my top 10. Arguably the most powerful neutralized champion still. If you play her in a really skilled manner, she does great. She just suffers a little bit from the 6-star tax. Mistakes now are lethal for her because she's going up against rank 3 champions, and additionally, just the block damage is really rough with her. And like, most people need to play her in a way where you are taking block damage. It's just she's not going to last in a quest very long, or in battlegrounds if you are taking all that block damage without needing some some potions and things like that. That said, like, if you know all the animations with her, she goes way up higher on the list. But to me personally, until she's a 7-star, she's going to sit around number 10 for me, just because the Mystic class is so powerful, and like, she's not as necessary to absolutely nuke the crap out of stuff anymore. And additionally, you saw at the beginning, battlegrounds is not my priority, and like, so that nuking ability I don't necessarily need as much, and she's just, risk reward isn't as high as she used to be for me, so she comes in at number 10. Now, my personal number 9 is Hood, the Hood. And he wouldn't have made the list if he wasn't available in the Titan Crystal as a 7-star. I think now that he's a 7-star, it's like his stock went way back up. The thing I like about Hood is, like, yes, he is a mystic. Yes, he does some crazy things against Cosmics with lots of buffs, but he is just sort of like a generically good champion as well. As long as they're not resistant to energy damage, his hexes are absolutely crazy, the amount that they can dish out. Even if you just use him as like a bomb for one champion on a path and then don't use him for the rest of the path, you can just like expend those bullets and absolutely explode them, and it's nuts. But on top of that, his buff control, he's got the stagger and the fate seal. That sometimes comes up, having access to both of them. When he's awakened in high sig, he's got a really powerful power steal, which allows him to be a little bit more aggressive and just continually gain power. He also becomes stun immune for it, and you can have that hex up, you can have that invisibility up for like a lot of the fights. I use my 6-star a lot. The fact that he's a 7-star now, I think he's just a classic mystic that can also have range for a variety of champions. And of course, if there's buffs, he's just absolutely fed. And then if you really want to use him on a non-buff path, there are of course synergies that allow you to keep the bullet replenishment up. But yeah, I can go on and on about Hood. I've liked him for a long time, and he was about to miss my top 10 for the first time in a while until he came out as a 7-star. I think, when we see more rank 3 duped ones out in the universe, he's going to continue to be one of the most powerful mystic champions, and he does deserve that number 9. Now, coming in at number 8 for me is somebody that's lower on my list than is going to be on most people's list, again, based on my playstyle, and that's Juggernaut. Now, Juggernaut is arguably overtuned in the way that he was buffed, but it's okay. It's okay, because like in Battlegrounds, he's basically an automatic ban for me. Like, if I ever see a rank 3 of a Juggernaut, I just ban him because he's an absolute menace on attack in Battlegrounds. But when it comes to like regular content, he does actually have some limitations. Now, he does have like an interesting nullify off of his sig ability and a stagger, which is good for the mystic stuff, but you know how to play him. He's just an absolute tank. He gets those unstoppables. You can take blocked hits. You can just ramp up and throw these massive special 2s that are unblockable and just doing like a ridiculous amount of damage. So there's not much that that can stop him, but there are a few ways, of course, to turn him off. Particularly if there's like a non-damaging debuff on him, it just completely turns him into like a noodle. And yeah, I know you can get to the special 3 and make that work, but like there's a lot of nodes and ways to shut him down. Kind of like with Hercules, they've figured out ways to turn him off. In Battlegrounds, we haven't really seen it yet. He's still an absolute menace on attack. But for me, the way I'm playing the game, I'm not grabbing Juggernaut that often, but I can't deny how powerful and how much of a nuke he is, even in PvE content. So he has to make my top 10. I'm just putting him at 8. You'll see on my more objective ranking later that he is going to be higher than that, however. But for me personally, number 8 Juggernaut, he definitely makes the top 10. Hopefully you understand why he's a little bit lower on my list. Now, number 7, I'm going to give to a newer champion, and that is Shathra. Now, nothing is immune to her wasps. However, energy damage is something that can be mitigated by certain champions that have energy resistance, so something to keep in mind, of course. She does have a little bit of power steal. It's not necessarily a power control component. It's more about feeding herself lots of power. But the thing is, if you play her in a skilled manner, basically one special 1 and then special 2 while charging the heavy is going to eliminate a huge amount of health. If it's a little bit more health to play with, 2 special 1s, then the special 2 in the same way. You can play her safely with relics or stunning before doing the heavy, or you can kind of master your spacing like you would with Tigra and try to connect your heavies to get even more damage. But on top of that, she has one of the greatest tools in the Mystic class, which is Atrophy, right? Kindred was the first sort of Atrophy champion. I mean, Mojo a little bit, but, Kindred was the first true Atrophy champion. Everyone was like, oh my god, Kindred is going to be so good for Maestro. But, Kindred ended up not being the best Maestro counter by a long shot. However, having a meta champion like her with the Atrophy, it just reduces the length of his buffs, turns him off. Really good. And her Atrophy has like 100% uptime. So if you can learn to play Shathra, she is one of the most powerful mystics, really good for Serpent as well. I just think she's generically kind of like Hood. She can really take on, health pools very quickly. Nothing is immune to her wasp. She has the Atrophy. Pretty simple champion, but if you master her spacing, there's not a lot that can stand in her way, and she can really finish with a lot of health if you're playing really well. The risk with her is like the Hela problem, where people are just like charging heavies in the air, thinking it's the right idea, and then getting smacked. So you do need to learn how to play her the right way, but I do think she's an amazing addition to the Mystic class, and for me personally, she's my number 7. Next up, number 6 is going to be Werewolf. Now, Werewolf is good at countering cosmics. Like, obviously, if they have buffs, it's going to be a little bit extra damage, and he does have like a few targeted nullifies. But the big thing about him, of course, is his own personal power gain, the ability to do damage through block, and basically the ability to get a ton of power without giving them a lot of power. That is one of the most underrated abilities in the game, is like not having to hit them that much and you personally getting a ton of power. Think of like Hyperion back in the day, things like that. So, and he has like a little bit of the Valkyrie play style where you can only hit block and still do absolute crazy things. And then, of course, if it's the full moon, he just gets ramped up even more quickly. I do like his special 3. It has a stun at the end of it and does even more damage at the end with that big rupture. And, his special 2, when he's in the Curse of Lycanthropy, is just absolutely devastating. A little bit of an annoying defender, too, if you care about 2 ways. But, enough said about him. He does physical damage, which as a Mystic, I enjoy not always having to rely on energy damage. We'll talk about some other ones later, but like the Rupture, the physical damage type mystics are a little bit of a rare breed. We've got Rintra and Spiral as well, but for the most part, mystics are doing lots of energy damage, so it's nice to see a big physical damage. Like Hood, like Shathra, he has range beyond cosmics. Like, yes, he will absolutely destroy Gore and things like that. He's usable for Serpent, usable for some of the other cosmic threats out there, like even Maestro a little bit, because of his power gain. You can get the specials off, which will bypass the glancing. Really nice. But he has generic ability to quest. I've used him a ton for pain content, like on the gauntlets at the end. I think for at least 2 of them he's been on my team. for the final week gauntlet. So yeah, I just love his versatility, his simplicity. If you know what you're doing, if you're managing your power, he's just going to absolutely devastate opponents. And for battlegrounds, he's quite good, but like in terms of questing, I think he's one of the best mystics just for general questing. And that's a lot of what this list is about. It's about fun. I mean, who doesn't want to play a giant werewolf that's howling all over the place, gaining power? That is fun. And that's why he is, for me, number 6. All right, we're in the top 5 now, and I'm giving number 5 to Spiral. Now, Spiral is a champ that I've only tested on the server, so I haven't put her into practice, but I'm looking at what her kit does, and like obviously targeting Serpent, obviously targeting Mystics that have like unblockable buffs and immortality and death immunity and things like that. But the utility that they gave her, if it works that well for the most meta Cosmic Defender, we have to assume that future Cosmic Defenders that have similar threats are also going to get neutralized by her kit. Now, like Werewolf, she has a very sort of physical style instead of energy damage, which again is nice for Mystic. She's got all those massive ruptures, but her utility includes like destruction of buffs, right? So she has the destroy, turning them to rubble, which is nice. She's not getting massive bursts from Mystic Dispersion, but it will increase her rupture. And then additionally, kind of like America Chavez, if they have a lot of buffs, she does more damage. So not only can she targeted get rid of some buffs, like some really important ones like the death immunity, obviously on Serpent, and unblockable from like Cersei or other champions that have unblockable buffs, but she also just ramps up between Mystic Dispersion and all that when they have buffs. It makes her have more damage. Additionally, her swords are like such a unique mechanic. It gives you these like abilities to do massive combo chains as well. If they have power gain, she's just an absolute, she's totally capitalizing off of that with her little power steals and just like generally keeping things going when they have power gain buffs, which, we see pretty often in the Cosmic class. So like where she lands for me is like generically high damage if you're playing with high skill, lots of relevant utility for Serpent, which means she's probably gonna have utility in other places. And I'm only scratching the surface with her. I think when more people have her and are using her, they're gonna find like not only is she a Serpent counter, but she's just incredibly fun, skill-based champion that's gonna be taking on a lot of the contests. I do think that over time we're going to see her used more, but there is of course a risk putting her this high on my list this early that she will drop sometime in the future. So just take it with a grain of salt, but for me personally today, she is number 5. Number 4 is going to go to Absorbing Man. A little bit of the 6-star tax for him, but I do have a sense that because he's punching up a little bit less well than we thought he might, he actually has potential to come out as a 7-star, and I'm kind of banking on that. Whereas like Juggernaut already is a 7-star and maybe shouldn't be. Tiger's probably not going to be a 7-star. I think Absorbing Man is likely to be a 7-star this year, in my opinion. And he's just such a good counter to so many things. Like one of the most versatile immunities in the entire Mystic class, especially with the synergy. It can also extend to poison immunity. And not just the immunities, it's the physical resistance and or the energy resistance given the situation. Those are absolutely massive resistances that makes him a total tank. And then of course, if there's armor break, if he's feeding his immunities, the fight's an absolute joke. So, he is best suited for war attack and a little bit of battlegrounds. So like for me personally, I find that like that doesn't matter as much to me. However, he comes up so often as a meta attacker in questing. I just think there are so many situations that you can throw at him that are either going to ramp him, or if you play him well, he's got the safety nets of his nice regen and the resistances and all that he's just an absolute great champion. So he is potentially the highest rated like 6-star on any of my lists. Maybe skill will have somebody higher if you know who I'm talking about. But, I don't have a lot of 6-star only champions this high. But for me personally, he is quite good and he deserves this spot. due to what he brings to the table. If you play him skillfully, it's great, but you can also just get to the special threes. The fact that he was so good in Necropolis means that he does have some of that range when you throw the special threes, and you get the the cruelties and some extra stuff like that. So he's a bit of a dream to play in most scenarios. Punching up a little bit currently. Once he comes out as a 7-star, I think he will very solidly solidify himself in the top 5. For now, he still comes in at number 4. Now, my number 3 is actually going to be Dr. Doom. And now, speaking of 6 stars only, I almost forgot about Doom as I was talking about Absorbing Man. So he is potentially one of the highest 6-star only champs. But it's just, you cannot deny how broken he is with his crit resistance, with his high armor, with his high attack, with the ability to just like throw special threes into the wind. There are, of course, ways to shut him down if you like take away power steal and power burn and things like that. But overall, Doom is still Doom, and there are a lot of people that have ascended Dr. Dooms that are still using him all the time. And I personally don't use him a lot, but I used to say that he was the best champion in the game, even better than Hercules. I agree with that, because like it's not all about damage, it's about control and it's about tankiness. And like we know what Doom can do. He is still incredible. Doesn't even really need the awakening ability, even though that opens up a little bit of cheese and things like that. But yeah, I mean, dude, it's Dr. Doom. He is still Dr. Doom. And until we get to the fact that he's not a 7-star and we're on like rank 5 7-star, I think he's still going to be kicking around in our top 3s everywhere. So that's Dr. Doom. If he ever came out as a 7-star, it would be quite the time, because I've done a ton of Doom fights in my time, and whether it's power control, just general damage, general tankiness, nullify, stagger, he's got it all. Incinerate damage, he's got a little bit of shock immunity himself, armor break immunity. Really good champ. What else is there to say about him? He's still top 3. Now, my top 2 champion is going to go to Kushala. She is one of my highest ranked champions, very high SIG and rank 3 as well. It's another DLL champ, and she's just designed like with such precision, lots of cool abilities. Like, the way that you ramp her up with doing her different blessings, alternating between the parry and the intercepting and the heavy attack. It's a really fun sort of mini game to sort of keep all that stuff going. The higher SIG she is, the longer the pause, and also the better chance to turn them into passives, which really opens her up. So I do highly rate her SIG, and I think especially as a 7-star, you want her at high SIG if you're going to rank her. It just makes her a lot easier to play. But she has lots of utility as well. In addition to like the bleed immunity and the incinerate immunity, which is great for Mystic, she can block unblockables. And Soul Barb is such a unique way to do damage. So like if they're incinerate immune but have a lot of buffs, like very few things can get rid of the Soul Barb, especially when you make it as a passive. She also has access to some massive degeneration. So on long form content, her degens followed up by other specials after that are absolutely insane. And then the incinerate damage and really targeted nullify, like this is just scratching the surface with her. She's one of those champions that it's like, oh, there's this challenge in front of me, yeah, she can handle it, because she has such a wide range. She's got her own form of tankiness, and not to mention the regen on block in addition to the unblockable counter makes her such a great champion. Like you can just block specials and she's going to regen them. I think the best fight I ever took with her was that Mole Man in the Summer of Suffering. Like she was so good for that fight. I absolutely loved it, and like it was such a good showcase of everything that she can do, like anti-shrug with her passives and being able to take big blocked hits and like countering specials with her heavy, parrying specials, like all this stuff. It was just an absolute dream to play her, and that's why for me she is so high. She is so relevant, not just for Battlegrounds, not just for war. I think for questing, take her off the shelf, put her in a quest, she's probably going to be able to take on something in some way, shape, or form. So Kushala, incredible champ. She's my number 2. And my number 1, this is a lot of the Illuminati love this champion and have for a long time, but I've got to give it to America Chavez, because she's just America Chavez. And like, I think of all the champions that I mentioned earlier that are not just Cosmic Slayers, she can generically take so many matchups. Like obviously if there's buffs, it's great, but she can ramp herself up to like almost 50% of her like absolute maximum when there's no buffs, just the way that her opening of dimensions works. Now, her power control against ability power rate is one of the best in the game because it doesn't rely on buffs or debuffs. It's just part of her kit with the passives as long as she can land her heavies. Now that we have relics, it's just crazy. It makes opening dimensions for her a lot easier. She's spamming specials. It's so good. I've always liked her for Serpent, right? Like more than any champion. Like Spiral's gonna obviously take the cake on that soon, but she has so many good ways to deal with Serpent as well. Her special 2 hits like an absolute truck. If you get to the special 3, it's not that bad because it opens up a million dimensions. And yeah, like there's something about her style that just makes her extremely versatile. Like I can't even put my finger on it. Like yes, ability power rate, yes, ramping, yes, big energy damage, a little bit of healing, punishing them if they have any buffs at all. Like even if they have one buff on them and then you're doing what you're normally doing, opening her dimensions like that, it's just absolutely crazy. The special 2 is one of the hardest hitting special 2s in the entire game, especially if she's fully built up. And you know, her own personal power gain, the Mystic Dispersion, and then shutting down the power gain against the champion, her heavy reach, her ability to stun off of the heavy. It's just, there's so much going on with her that, you know, you almost have to see it to believe it, right? On paper, you don't necessarily think she's the most powerful champion in the game or anything like that, but like the amount of times that I've used my rank 3 America in just anything is just absolutely incredible. She is, in my opinion, the best Mystic currently, and it was really cool that she was released in the initial pool. A lot of people were like, hey, she's a great Mystic, I'm going to bring her to rank 3. I think it was at that point when she was in that initial basic pool that people realized how good she is, and she is still considered that good, even though powerful Mystic after powerful Mystic keeps coming out after her. She is still at the pinnacle of her game, and that's America Chavez. Now, really quickly, I'm going to bring up what we call the recommended list. This is my more objective ratings that are not based on like my own personal preferences and the way I play. I'm just going to throw out a couple interesting differences. First of all, Doom is number 1. I think that's self-explanatory, but America, Kushala, Absorbing Man, Werewolf, Spiral, they're all in the top 10 still. Some of the differences though, I did include Diablo up there. I talked about him earlier. For a lot of people, he is such a good champion and like an obvious rank up that, you know, I think objectively he's higher than I ranked him in my personal list. Also, Rintra. Now, you know, Tigra is Tigra, amazing neutralized, but like when it comes to the difference between Tigra and Rintra is so much tankier and safer to play, and you can make mistakes, you can be taking hits to the face, he's just like taking no damage, and he's a 7-star coming out in the upcoming Titan pool, which is quite scary. That is quite scary to me, that he's going to be kicking around. He does not need his awakened ability at all on offense. In fact, some people say he's better without it, but even with it, it's a lot of power gain, great. But yeah, he's going to be dangerous, and he may continue to go up on the list. Personally, not my cup of tea, but again, this is a more objective list. He's going to make my top 10. Another champ that we didn't see before was Longshot. Again, I'm not a huge Longshot fan. I think he really, really shines in Battlegrounds, but he is a nuke, right? And he has that really powerful Fate Seal. As long as they're not Fate Seal or Incinerate immune, he's doing crazy things. Even if they are a little bit, he's got that big instant bleed off of the special 1. If he's awakened, he can like be stealing unstoppable and unblockable buffs, which is pretty nice. But yeah, pretty easy to play and just very versatile. Again, I'm just not a huge fan of, like, I know he's not a parry heavy champion by design, but like you do end up parry heavying a lot, and I'm not a huge fan of that. But hey, again, this is a more objective list. Longshot is massively powerful, especially as a 7-star, so I did have to include him there. And then, you know, honorable mentions, I couldn't let go of Shathra, Tigra, White Tiger. They still made honorable mentions on my more objective list. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think. Make sure to hit a like and subscribe, share it with your alliance, and please write a comment. I would love to have a discussion. Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree? Who did I leave out? Who am I overselling? Who am I underselling? I would love to know your own personal opinion. And just remember, this is going through my own personal lens as somebody who loves the PvE content, who loves fun in the game. And that's going to do it for today. So thank you so much for checking it out. That's going to do it, and I'll catch you in the next one.